Alright, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, I created a new replit. This is the third video on arrays. The first two videos are linked in the description. Now, the code to this particular class is also linked in the description, though there's not a whole lot of code here to really look at, so you can type it as well. As you can see, I declared a string array. I'm going to give it the name of roster, so when I refer to it, I can simply say, hey, roster, do this, roster, do that. And then I assign roster a new string array of 8 elements. And you can see down here that each one of those 8 elements, numbered 0 through 7, are assigned here. I gave them each values of a last name. Now, last video, we were able to system.out.println, and we would call an element of the array, and we would go ahead and then get the output. So I'm going to go ahead and do that again real quick just to kind of verify that that works. And you can see we print out Johnson. Johnson is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th element in the array with the index of 5. Therefore, it prints that out. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this, Control X. What we wanted to do is we wanted to traverse through the array. So what we'll end up using is a traditional for loop first, and then we will use a different for loop, an enhanced for loop, also to traverse through the array. Traversing through the array basically lets us go through the whole array, maybe to check for values or just to print them out in this particular case. So we're going to go ahead and let's set up a traditional for loop. We will use the keyword for. We will declare an integer variable named I, which will be assigned the value of 0. We will use a semicolon, go ahead, space, as long as I is less than the length of the roster. In order to represent the length of the roster, we say roster, which is the name of the array, and then just length. And then we will put another semicolon, and then we will I++. Now, in this particular for loop, we wouldn't have to put down the braces, the curly braces, but you'll never be wrong by using braces for a for loop or for an if statement. So my recommendation is just use the braces. Instead of having to worry about remembering every little rule in programming, we know that braces are always acceptable in this particular case. So I've got my for loop braces right there. I'm going to paste my system.out.println, but I'm changing that to I instead. I'm going to go ahead and run that and kind of explain what's going on while this starts to try to run. So I have an integer named I, and it's 0. So 0 is less than the length of the roster because the roster length is 8. So what it'll do is it'll go into this for loop, and it'll print out roster I, which would be 0, which would be Grabowski. And then we'll add 1 to I. So now integer I is 1, which is still less than roster length, which is 8. So it'll print out 1. And you can see that it traverses through that whole array and prints all those names in order because I'm counting in order. Now, that's one way to do it. I also want to show something. If I wanted to do this right here, let's say roster.length. Some people might suggest, well, why wouldn't you just do 8 and run it? And if we run this, we'll see that, yeah, this works out just as well. But using a magic number or a literal number can sometimes cause lots of grief. So we highly recommend using it. You should instead find out the length of the array. You can see it just ran the same way, right? But what if I add somebody to my roster? I go here. I'm going to add a 9th person to my roster, which would be the 8th, and I'm just going to call them Adams because it's easy. Now if I ran this, you would see that that literal 8 won't run. It'll end up just crashing. So that would be a problem. As a matter of fact, there's going to be actually 2 problems here. So we'll see that once it runs. So the first error I have is the index out of bounds for length 8. So, and this is in the 16th line here. So what that means is I'm trying to assign this 9th element to this roster array, but it's only 8 elements long. So Let me go ahead and fix that and run it, and then let's see our output. You can see now that it'll compile. I don't have any runtime errors, but you'll also notice that Atoms never shows. Again, that's because I use this magical number. So basically, it's always better just to try to remove as many literal numbers as you can and refer to variables as much as possible. So now if I were to run that, it would show all the elements in the array, and we'd be back to running just fine. So that is your traditional for loop. Once we go ahead and we see the output here, we'll move to an enhanced for loop. Alright, so there we have the output. So now let's go ahead and let's get rid of this part of the for loop. In order to run an enhanced for loop, you have to know the data type that we're going to try to sort through the array or traverse through the array. Now, this array is all string data type, so I'm going to say for every string, which I will refer to as S, and we're going to use the colon this time, not the semicolon, but the colon, and then we're going to say traverse through the array known as roster, and our call to system.out.println will be a little bit different too. We will simply refer to those string S instances. So when we go ahead and we run this, this iterates and looks for every string in the roster array and then prints out each one of those strings as they are found. So our output will be all those names in that array. So that's an enhanced for loop. All right, so you've learned how to declare variables, array types, and to assign arrays, and now you've learned how to traverse through them. What we'll do in the next video is we will try to see if we can find a way using the string API to print out only the Polish last names. So we'll refer to the Polish last names as the ones ending in ski. So if you want to get ahead of that one, you're definitely welcome to give it a shot. But next video, we'll go ahead and show how that's done.